Welcome to the Modern Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Giordani. I got my man, Memo Cardona. Is that how you say it?
Right.
Yeah. Last name, perfect. I didn't want to butcher that. He is a real estate flipper, developer, owns his own portfolio of rentals, also has a lending business, and I'm sure there's other things that I don't know about that we haven't talked about before. So I'm excited to have you on, man.
Right on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, brother. It's funny. We actually connected in Cancun for a wedding, which is so casual, but somehow I heard about you from Steven like super long time ago. And he's like, you need to meet this guy, Memo. He's like, he's into flipping. He's doing kind of what you're doing. You need to connect with him. He's a good dude. And it's just funny that we somehow connected when we were in Cancun. And I feel like we were obviously drinking. So there was a few nights where I woke up in the morning and I was like telling the wife, I was like, man, I love this dude. And I actually remember all of our conversation because I was so inspired. He's just so humble. Cool. and because you were just so willing to share all your business and all of that. And you're super humble we were just talking about going to New York and looking at all these billionaires who are making $100 million a month. And so.
No, that's cool. It was great. Dude, the wedding was cool.
Oh yeah.
It was a good time. It was always cool to hang out and especially have good business conversations over a beer.
100%.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Where'd you grow up?
Local, born and raised here in San Diego.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I studied here, state, finance, international econ.
Okay.
And kind of always been a local person.
Nice.
I do love traveling.
Mm-hmm.
I just love coming back home.
Yeah.
When you're flying into San Diego, it's just like, dude, it's beautiful. Like, why would you leave? So.
Yeah, I would never want to live anywhere else.
Yeah,
I tried for a year and it didn't make any sense. What was your evolution after college?
I've always had that entrepreneur mindset, So I've always had, it's either, I was talking to my kids about this the other day. I think in high school, I always had about 2 jobs. That sometimes I had 3 jobs at a time. So it was always kind of like go, save, invest. Had a lot of opportunities, to do. God, I brokered, I wholesaled vehicles back in the 90s, early 2000s, especially when the internet kind of started going. You had the online platform for auto auctions and stuff like that.
Oh,
so.
Cool.
Landscaping for a long time. I did that, build up a portfolio of clients for that. One of the last ones before I got into real estate was payday loan check cashing stores.
Okay.
So sold those to a company called the Money Tree. So it was like
the company called the Money Tree. Yeah, that's a big ass fucking company.
Well, yeah, they're big. Yeah, they're big. They're out of Washington.
Yeah, they're a big company.
It was it's a poor man's bank. Yeah. It's a bank for the unbanked. It's a community financial services. So, you're servicing a lot of the clients. Great financially, when you look at the APRs and you look at what you're charging, as an owner, it's a great business. Didn't really like the business because it's just that, at the end of the day, you don't sleep good, it's because it's like, they're really not financially literate. They're not in a good place and you're not solving their problems. You're only making it worse. Yeah. So, got out of that business, my wife had our first child, and I remember taking him to our corporate office, and I was like, I don't want to leave this for him. Mm-hmm. It's like the last thing I want to do is have him working here and, like dealing with that. So exited out of that, got into real estate 2005, right around there.
Okay.
Full-time, all in. And just in time for the correction, the big crash.
Were you buying real estate then, or were you an agent, or were you a lender?
The stuff I bought, I really had my behind handed to me,
sure.
Because it was obviously, right before the peak.
Mm-hmm.
The first 2-3 years, it was a good market. There was a lot of money out there. It was easy money. Everyone was making a ton of money.
Yeah.
The 07, 08 when the market started shifting, that's when, I had to pivot to short sales, to foreclosures, was blessed to have a few, bank foreclosure REO accounts. So it's like the banks give you the properties,
I did too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So that was a blessing because those years were rough.
Oh,
It was like, 2% were succeeding and 98% of the agents were just like dying. Like it was bad. Short sales were always fun and fascinating, because it, you take on a project and it takes you 3 years to get paid. And, there's no way you made money on it because just the amount of time and effort, But the blessing there though is, you get to see exactly, how a corporate client operates on the real estate side. You know, you're seeing, your property manager, your preservation, you're dealing with, evictions, the legal aspect, you start seeing all of that, so that really ultimately developed now, as now that, you own the stuff and you're managing these companies and everything, now you start looking at your exposure, quantifying stuff, at the end of the day, which is the better way, take this loss here or take that loss there, so it was part of the, the training,
Sure. It's asset management.
At the end of the day.
Yeah. Like when I had stuff from, I was getting stuff from iServe.
Okay.
So it was a subsidiary of Bank of America. And my dad had an account, and this is when I moved to Palm Springs. And so I was a realtor during that time, but it was all like, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 houses back then. And then I was doing short sale negotiations for like other brokerages and other agents who didn't know how to do it. So I was doing that on the side, but I was 19 years old. So I was like learning all this shit on, I didn't know any better, right? Like during I didn't know what a recession was when you're 18, 19 years old. So it was interesting. It was an interesting learning experience, but I'm sure for you, like now I'm sure transformative for the way you manage the flips now or the businesses from a management perspective.
That, and I think the missed opportunity, the hindsight, where, I remember seeing, tapes that like, so when banks had, hundreds or thousands of properties that they have to get rid of off the books, they put them on a list and they call them tapes, right? So it's like, here's 100 properties, here's 300 properties. And I remember seeing a lot of tapes where the average sales price of the house was like under $2,000. And we're talking about a house, like detached houses. And, but they were like, oh, you needed $50 million. You got to close within 4 days. And, you got to go hard on your deposit and no financing. And for me, it's like, it's just out of my realm, right?
Right.
Now you pitch that to me up, you'll
figure it out.
I'll make sure I close on that, but it's that preparation is not there for when the opportunity pops up, and I don't know if maybe in my lifetime, we probably won't see that opportunity again. Cause I think that's kind of every 40 to 50 years where you have those major corrections, I'm sure we'll get some few more recessions, which is opportunity, you know? But those generational, like the once in a lifetime thing, if you're there and you're able to get in that wave, I mean, you build tremendous wealth that way. Those were $1 billion portfolios that, were sold for, cents on the dollar, 1-2 cents on the dollar. So.
Right. Were you buying a lot? Were you buying and holding a lot in 2000?
Yeah, but it was onesie twosie, it was kind of getting my feet wet. And it was, so when the economy adjusts, everything dries up. Right. Capital markets dry up, cash dries up, and then fear sets in everybody. And then whatever money you have, you're like holding on to it because you're afraid because you may not get another paycheck for 90 days or 6 months, right? So, the income, I remember, from 05 to 7, I almost maintained it. I think I might have had a small drop, but my production tripled, and then it doubled again the next year. And I'm still making almost the same amount of money. It wasn't the same, because everything's just falling like crazy,
right.
So you're scrambling just to maintain the lifestyle. And then you figure it's like, is it really, like what's priority, So when you have these recessions, like the big ones, you really, a lot of times you underestimate how bad it's going to be, and obviously this was once in 40 years, 50 years, and I would love for it to come back, Well,
because I'm sure now you're prepared.
Oh, dude, I'd be all over it, So whenever I see these little blips, it's like, dude, you double down on everything because it's an opportunity, whenever there's fear out there, whenever there's adjustments on market. One thing I learned was in every market, there's winners and losers. In 08 through 11, the majority of everything was lost, everybody lost everything, bankruptcies, everything. But I remember being in circles where it's like, hey, that 1-2%, they're killing it, like insanely killing it. And the reflection there, it's like, how do I become that 1-2%? How do I get to that circle? What is it? Is it the exposure? Is it the network? Is it the opportunity? Where's the opportunity there? So
what do you think it is? I mean, so I look at 2023 was my best year ever.
Oh, good.
But a lot of people were struggling. Yeah. A lot of people lost a lot of money on flips.
We weren't there yet.
Yeah. So it's just, it was one of and there's going to be that time where I'm sure I could potentially be on the other side of that coin where my worst year ever.
Yes.
What do you think is the difference, like the difference maker with your experience going from, let's say, a good market to a great market or a bad market to kind of navigate the storm?
So one thing I've learned from an old timer was, because I have always operated where I was doing a couple of and flips at a time, kind of on a smaller scale. And my hesitation was always kind of, you don't want to really grow too big because then you have a lot of exposure. And I remember in '06, people like going from like having $20 million net worth to being bankrupt like in 6 months. Like I saw that a lot. So for me, I was like, whoa. You have to make sure you're solid and kind of slow growth, right? So the problem with when you're a really small operator is that sometimes you can get easily wiped away with an adjustment. So if the market goes down, that 100, 200, 500K you had saved up is gone and you're back at zero. So sometimes if you're smart, there's certain ways of approaching it, but if you can scale a business and let's say now you have 50 million of net worth and you do have a correction, you may lose 20%, 30%, you might drop down to 25 million, 30 million, you're not out of the game. And if you're smart, you probably double down in that market and now you really took more market share, So there's a few things that go into play there. I think the biggest thing by far is mindset. You can't drink the punch, because what sells, advertising, clicks and everything, subscriptions, it's toxic news, right?
100%.
The market's going to crash, the rates tripled, the default, the NODs tripled. Yeah, they went from 1 to 2, it's like it just doesn't make sense, right? So when you have to be careful not to feed into that. And if you surround yourself with big thinkers, with people operating in a great space that understand that, it's like, okay, we're having an adjustment in the market. What does that mean financially? How are we preparing? How are we protected? Are we solid? Okay, great. Now, where's the growth opportunity? Right. There's an opportunity here. We have to identify it and really go all in on that because those opportunities don't always pop up.
Right.
That same opportunity in a healthy market is going to be triple the cost. You have to buy your way into everything, buy the employee, pay more for salaries, pay more for everything.
It's more expensive.
Totally. Yeah. So it's a big mindset thing, and it's important that you kind of have to stay in that, out of the toxic, of whenever there's adjustments, there's pain and suffering. And it's unfortunate, but it's a thin ice there. You got to be very careful.
Yeah, and it's inevitable to happen. I think it's so funny. It's like since 2017, there's always been talks of like another recession, or every year from 2017 to now. Maybe not when things were like during COVID, right? 2022, I think, was the only year that they were talking about no recessions. But every other year there was talks of recessions happening, and we're still like people are still predicting that we may head into a recession.
Correct.
The second half of the year, but I think it's just interesting, just being prepared. And just being aware of what you have out, like especially for us, like how many are we taking on at a time? Are we over leveraged? Are we maybe wholesaling a few and keeping a few more? However it looks. But yeah.
And I think if you interpret the data, out of the majority of the recessions, real estate goes up in value. It's the few, like the Great Recession that was caused because of real estate, right? But usually, like we're probably in a recession or we're probably going to go into a recession.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean real estate's impacted. And usually it's the opposite. There's fear out there and people take, their money out of the stock exchange, out of the 401ks, and they park it into real estate.
Right.
They want something tangible. They need the write-offs. They want cash flow or something, right? So typically, again, we're in a recession, but what does that mean to us directly, And even a step further, when you start identifying, it's like, okay, what is that? Even if we do have a recession, when you keep it very simple, it's like, okay, how many deals do you want to do as an agent, as an investor, as anybody? Okay, 50, maybe 100. So what does that mean in this big scope? Well, you're 0.00 something of the market. So you can triple your production and it still doesn't mean anything to the market. Right. The market can be going up or it can be going straight down.
Sure.
You still really aren't that relevant in the overall picture of the market, Now, if you had 20 offices and you had, 10,000 agents, I would worry. But when it's a small operation or a small business or an agent or a lender, dude, in a horrible market, you can go from 20 deals to 80 deals just by grinding it out, getting on the phone, talking to everybody, networking your way out of it. You know,
Yeah.
There's so much out there. So when you keep things into perspective, dude, growth, you know, like that whole recession thing, that whole fear thing, it, you know, it doesn't, I believe it doesn't become relevant to you really, really big, you know, where now you're worried about like NAR lawsuits, right?
Sure.
Let's say you're, you know, you're Keller Williams or something. But from zero to there, it's like, dude, focus on growth, focus on making money, because, you know, the tide will move, and realistically, it's small pivots. It's not, you know, the end of your business, you know.
And I think like what you're saying too, a lot of that comes to mindset. I think when there was always like fear of, you know, the market slowing down. I think November of 2022 is when I was like, just feeling a little pressure, thinking that, you know, we could see rates going up. There was just a little bit more data coming out where I was just maybe getting a little nervous, and I was like, okay, either I pivot and I work 10 times harder than I did before, and I do things differently, and I adjust and I evolve and become better myself, I'll be fine. But if you stick back to the COVID mentality of not being productive and just thinking that business is just going to come easy and your phone's going to ring, it's not the reality.
Correct.
So it does become a huge mindset shift, but it is challenging because I'm sure both you focus on the data and things that go on in the news and unemployment and where rates are at to make your decisions on buying. And that sometimes can get in your head a little bit.
Always. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like trying to like navigating what is real and what's fake, like in your head in terms of negativity of the new, and it's from the news, right? But it is data that we have to take in. So it's interesting.
And so, for example, that period, you know, we took a few haircuts on a few projects, and it was kind of like, you pick a neighborhood and you figure it's like, hey, we made X amount on these two deals, you know, 2 blocks away, but on this one we lost money, you know, and why, you know. And there's so many different dynamics, you know, and you know, it could be this, it could be that. But at the end of the day, what I always tell my acquisition team, it's like, we have to go to bat. You have to take the swing. Like, you may strike out, it's okay, but you took you at least you swung, right? But you're not going to get the home run. You're not going to get the base hit if you're not swinging, you know. So it's like, yeah, we might have taken a loss here, but we took 8 or 9 or 10, you know, other wins over here, you know. So the most important thing that you have to be, you know, that whole paralysis by analysis. Once you get fear in there, it really gives you the hesitation where when you really should be moving forward, you're kind of like thinking it through. So it's important to kind of, you know, like during that shift, that 6-month shift where the rates tripled and, you know, we took, you know, some hits on some properties. What really got us through this was a lot of the properties that we were buying when no one else was buying, because we got really good deals, you know, and it just canceled out all the other ones, you know. And it's that mentality. It's like, we're moving forward. Even the market's hard, we're moving forward, you know. Obviously, responsibly adjusting, making your numbers,
of course,
very calculated risk, stuff like that. You know?
And adjusting what you're, instead of doing, now you're adjusting for depreciation on your ARVs.
And then neighborhood specific, you know, demographics are different, you know, coastal's, like everything's so much different. How many houses are on the neighborhood in terms of inventory levels and all that stuff. But when obviously when the market's shifting too, you can't predict what inventory is going to increase in the beginning of it. So sometimes it's like, at least for me, I was looking kind of like from helicopter airplane level first of like, hey, maybe I need to like sit this out. For me, it's you have a company. So like for me being just a onesie, like by myself, I was like, you know what? I'm going to sit on the sidelines for a few, even though I would still make offers, but I would make them really low because I would have to be very particular on what I was willing to take on. And I'd rather preserve during that time and be ready when things shift a little bit better. And that's a very smart approach because those 6 months, kind of like with COVID, you know the market took a shock. The rates went from 3 to 7 or COVID, the market completely stopped. And we were way overdue for a major adjustment in COVID. And I figured, okay, it's here. You know, like, okay, this is it. And the opposite happened. Everything shot up, right? Because they pumped the economy with all this money. And, you know, last year, when you know, a year before, when the rates tripled, you know, I figured, okay, how bad is this going to be? Is it a 10% adjustment? Or is it a 40% adjustment? You know, I remember 2007, it never stopped for 2-3 years. It kept on going and going. And it was like, dude, like you have to know how to,
following knife.
Yeah, you got to get out of it, you know, as fast as possible. So So it's one of those things where it's out of all of our hands,
Right.
And during those periods, we're reassessing everything weekly, what hit the market on every specific asset, it's like, because dynamics change. If you're the only property on that zip code, king of the hill.
Yeah, it doesn't matter at that point.
But if 10 hit the market this weekend, dude, you better
You're
be
fucked.
the first one to be able to sell. Nicest, cheapest, best house to sell. You know, so
I agree. What does your team look like right now?
On the Renovate San Diego?
Yeah.
So we have the acquisition side, 5 to 6 team members. So they are out there talking to agents, wholesalers, attorneys, kind of getting out there, networking with everybody, looking for, anything that it's not performing, anything that needs a cash buyer, attorney, evictions, probate's kind of trending for the last year and a half or two. We got a couple of 3, 4 on the renovation side, which is the project managers, overseeing the construction crews. There's a lot of construction crews there. And then on the dispo side, our dispo is full MLS. So all of our inventory goes through the MLS. Yeah, we don't really wholesale. So we do have our listing disposition agent.
Okay.
There's maybe 2, 3, 4 people in the office.
Okay.
So like the marketing, the asset manager, that kind of stuff, accounting.
Gotcha. So when you're talking about putting stuff like disposition side, if you're not wholesaling, are you doing novations or
everything's MLS.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, everything's full retail.
Okay.
So the stuff that on the back end when we're selling stuff, it's going to go, retail price. We're going to get an FHA VA buyer in there, on the MLS, held open, that kind of stuff.
But if you lock something up that may not fit your buy box, or you just straight canceling it?
We typically only lock up if we're going to take it down.
Okay.
Yeah. We haven't really done wholesaling because it can get tricky at times. Sometimes you can burn bridges. Because I like to make sure if we're going to escrow, we're closing on it.
Right.
I know it's some guys are really good at being able to dispose of it during the escrow process. And for us that's a different business model, which we're not. We're not set up that way.
Right.
We're set up as, hey, we're closing escrow on Tuesday. On Wednesday, demos in there. The construction crew's running. So,
right.
But everything that we're submitting on, we're taking down.
That's good. Yeah, I have always looked up to that model. I think there's a time and a place for wholesaling in certain instances, but it is an interesting thing. And I do think I was going to ask your opinion on it. I do think some like regulations eventually will come in on wholesaling. I feel like it's become so popularized, and a lot of people talk about it on social media, and it's just looked at in a totally different manner. And I feel like eventually, this is just my opinion, there's going to be some real big crackdowns on how you can wholesale, what wholesaling looks like, and what that's going to be.
Yeah. So in essence, you're a real estate broker. You're brokering real estate from one person to another. And at some point, there needs to be oversight there. And the problem there usually is a disclosure. It's not, things aren't being truly disclosed, Now, I get it. You're still in the legal space. You still have the right to assign or do something else with the contract. I understand that. However, the few times that things go really bad is when it comes to lie, and then there's legal cases that go to court, and then there's usually some kind of law that comes down saying, hey, if you do more than 2 a year, then you need a license or something like that. So. We have friends that, do phenomenal operations, 300, 400, 500 wholesales a year.
That's crazy.
Florida and Texas, out there. I think it's very specific, like novation, like, there's certain, other tools that work great in some markets, I think SoCal is a very niche-y, hard market. Everyone tells me, dude, that's a hard space to function out of. Everything's expensive. The cost to procure a deal, super expensive. Everything is just so tight. Right? It's a tight market. So I truly believe at some point it's going to come down. I'm curious to see how the whole commission thing is going to play out. With on the retail, on the agent side, where supposedly they want to get rid of the buyer's commission during the paid by the seller.
The NAR lawsuit.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. I know 2 or 3 states already changed laws for wholesaling. I think eventually
you have to have a license. Is what my understanding was.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
It does.
And I think there's a space when you do it right. Where it's like, hey, you have an issue. I can't go retail. I can't put on the MLS.
Sure.
There's a value for me bringing investors to you and vetting the process, because we don't want to do a daisy chain where it's like 5 wholesalers on the same deal.
Right.
You know, it's like, let me get you an end buyer, and it's going to cost a fee.
Right.
Call it a commission, call it a wholesale fee. You
Sure.
know, and I'm watching. You know, you're getting top dollar for your condition because obviously, you know, it's problematic. But I think as long as it's fully disclosed, the seller knows. You know, they're on the same page. There's a space for that. There's a need for it. Our industry needs it, but I think it's still very kind of gray right now.
I think so too. I do think that, but it's interesting. I'm in a coaching program now, and I spend a lot. And there's a lot of people who are doing, like you said, $300,000 and $400,000. Sorry, 300 and 400 deals per year that do big operations in the Midwest and in these other states. And they're making small fees, right? $10,000, but like in our market, like $100,000, you know, 50 grand.
Yeah.
So it's just a different, but it's scalable. The difference between those models and the fix and flip model.
Yes. So you could be in a little small room with 10, people on the phone.
Yeah.
You're doing everything from the Midwest.
And you're doing it virtual.
Yeah. Texas.
Yep.
And I'm all about it too, because I've bought rental properties. Like I bought buy and holds from wholesalers.
Oh, there you go.
You know, and I won't even see the house.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen every house that I've done.
Yeah. Well, you can $50. You get a local BPO.
Right.
Guy goes out there, takes a picture, drives it, gives you his valuation. Aside from the hard money, aside from what they're telling you. You know? It's $50. An agent will go out there and give you a full write up, take pictures, and say, "Hey, this is what it is." You know?
Yeah.
It's a need that it's a valid business model. It's just I think the way they approach it might be still kind of needs to be cleared up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think it's regional too. San Diego, California is different from
100%.
Yeah, this state is weird,
Yeah. And I think we'll be one of the ones that will get locked down pretty quickly if there's lawsuits that do take place or something happens that sheds light on what it is. But I mean, at the end of the day, who knows? You still buy from wholesalers, and it's still a business that makes sense for someone like you and I to pick up deals if they all make sense.
I love working with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love, like, from your side of things, because all my business is all agent relationships too.
Good.
So it's hard. It's like, you go and you get a deal that may not fit your buy box that you locked up, but you can wholesale it. But I don't love doing that.
And as long as you're transparent,
right?
Because at the end of the day, you want to get the client to the finish line. And how it looks, dude. We've done some crazy. You look at the deals, but they're like, it makes sense, and the client got what they needed.
Sure.
Not everyone's qualified to structure deals.
Sure.
Especially like the newer agents that may not have that experience, and there's a value to that.
Sure.
So at the end of the day, you either lose it to a foreclosure, bank takes it back, and you take a total loss,
right?
Or you walk out with money in your pocket,
right?
And it's complicated where only a few individuals can really understand that. So
most times I just cancel or ask for try to get the reduction where it makes sense for me to do it. Sure. But yeah, it is few and far between. What do you think? Speaking of NAR, what do you think is going to happen with that?
No idea. I know there'll be opportunity though.
Yeah. Well, of course. Yeah. With anything, there's opportunity. But
I had a buddy I think he's like number 4 or 5 in the state of Las Vegas, his brokerage, and he was saying that like everyone, all the big guys. So these attorneys are going state by state, right? And they go down the list and they say, hey, these are the 20, 30, 50 brokerages that we're going to include in the lawsuit, and they're going to get settled out. They'll pay X amount to get it done with. So if you're a big guy, like if you're in, I don't know, top 10, 20 brokers in that state, I'd probably be worried. This guy, he was number 5, and he already met with his attorneys. He already put the plan. He already figured how to, get it prepared. Yeah,
right.
It's like, hey, this is what's going to happen. And most importantly, he's a smart cat. Where's the opportunity? There will be some guys that will fail because they're just, big machines that aren't that efficient, that may be on the hook for a few, $1 billion,
Wow,
something ridiculous, right? But there's always opportunity there. So I'm curious to see how it's going to play out. I think I don't approach it with fear. I think there's going to be some pivots, some adjustments. Every country has a different system. Australia, they all have different, systems of selling real estate.
Right.
I think there might be a year or two of transition. I think as long as, like, if you're an agent, I think as long as you understand your value, where, you understand the difference between, one side of the block and the other, why that's, some parts in San Diego, there's a $2-3 million difference on what side of the street you're on, Or if you understand the HOAs, why that one's worth more, than this one. Hey, this one has, this parking situation. They include utilities, and it has this school district. So there's a certain value to that. It's hard to replace, because it's a people business. Doing retail, which you know very well, you get individuals that have high emotions, and it's, buying a house and moving is very, very stressful.
Yeah.
So you really have to be able to, be the filter. It's like, my client's way out here, the seller's way out here. Hopefully you got a good agent. Sometimes you don't. They're also strung out.
Right.
And then you're kind of the filter. It's like, okay, how do I put the transaction together? Okay, what does this really mean? He needs this. Okay, forget the whole story and the arguing and all the names calling, all that stuff. But hey, can you give me a $5,000 credit? We can close next week. Yeah, sure. It's done.
Right.
So there's a lot of value to that people can't quantify, and if you have that skill, if you have the network, if you have the the ability to put dots together, you're going to succeed in any market.
Yeah,
it may be slightly different, but I would be, if I was doing strictly retail, I would just be focusing on building that sphere where they know you're the person, you're the authority. There's certain markets, and especially in the high end stuff like Coronado, La Jolla, that there's people that they're so well connected that they already have their off market inventory, because I know that neighbor has a house that they would sell if they had that right price. So if you go to them and say, hey, I need a coastal property that I got 4 or 5 that's not on the MLS. Like, that's huge. You know what I mean? You could put so many deals together just by doing
100%,
that.
super valuable.
Yeah, so there's that dynamic. You need to make sure you're there. Right?
Yeah,
you can't just push paper anymore and like the whole internet stuff. Just get an online lead, slam dunk. That might be kind of restricted now.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think I watched someone recently where they were talking about the biggest thing is to be valuable and to show your value, whether it's like buying moving trucks, right? To where they can start using your moving trucks, having an Airbnb that they can stay in between like moving positions, or if you have to do a rent back or whatever it is. Correct. So different value propositions that makes you unique in your market space. I mean, in the high end, that's huge, but like for our, let's say our average of like an $800,000 purchase price here in San Diego, which is high for the national average, but having some type of value that you can offer your clients from kind of different, like unique perspectives, I think is going to be huge.
Totally. Yeah. And especially like, for example, right on the money, if you can give them a vendor list, here's the top 3 movers that I've used at least 30, 40 times. Right. Here's the painters, here's this and that, dude, that's huge. You cut the curve down, the moving headache drastically. So, and then you're super valuable because they're going to refer everybody out to you. It's like, dude, this guy, call him. He has the movers. 100%. You're bringing value to the table.
Totally. A little off topic. We were talking before we jumped on about you traveling to New York. And it's funny because when I first met you, like I said at the beginning of this, is like super humble dude. And I think everyone says that about you. Oh, I'm sure you get it a lot. But when you're not in the room, they all say that. So it's funny. But you were saying something when we were walking in. Let's talk about that again.
It goes to exposure. I like to get out to New York free, at least once or twice a year, right?
Traveling in general.
Yeah. And it's kind of more like, going down Billionaires Row, understanding the scope, of the economy. You got these hedge guys making $200 million a year, $100 million a year of salary, right? You look at, I think Goldman's bonus for, I think it was their last year. I think the juniors were making $40 million. I think it was a $40 million bonus or something like that. If you Google it, it's ridiculous. So when you start looking at different levels and scales, then you really start seeing how small, at least for me, my operation is. Then you start seeing how big the pie is. And then you start seeing like, there's a lot that you can do. Like, it really opens up your eye. And, when you're here locally or in your suburb, you start thinking like, oh, okay, I have influence, I'm doing okay, I'm doing production, and then you start drinking that, your own punch, you start believing your stuff, and it's super important to get out there and see it's like how people are playing at different levels, and this is part of the mastermind thing. And we both have that mentality where it's like paying for, for exposure, you collapse time, and especially the most important thing is when you see people operating at a high level and they're not the genius guy. They're just a doer. They're like, they minimize the fear and they move forward, And when you start seeing that, it's huge. So aside from traveling, because it's pretty cool, but, whenever I'm out there, I like to see, big real estate. I like to see, I love Wall Street, going down there, hanging out, and my kids too, and explain to them like, dude, pull this up. That's an $80 million penthouse, and blah blah blah. That builder, the developer, kind of going in there. It just opens up just the mentality, of what's available out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Every time me and the wife travel, is my most creative time that you get to kind of take a step back out of the business a little bit and look in, like from bird's eye view, and just kind of see where you're at and realize different things. Especially for me, like my success over the last few years of how dramatically it's changed my life. Honestly, completely changed. And to look at it and just kind of reevaluate and see where you're at. But then, like what you were talking about, seeing people at different levels where you're like, makes you realize what's possible.
Totally, especially like when you see like the yachts pull in.
Yeah, 100%.
It's like that. Who was that? That's that billionaire with the yacht over in San Diego with the 2 helipads.
I don't know what yacht you're talking about, but I don't know what he does.
He's like an oil magnet or mineral magnet guy out of Washington.
Oh, yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah. His boat's always out there. But whenever you got a trip, you have the dynamic of compressing work in a smaller period of time because you're on a crunch.
Right.
Like, I got to fly, I got to pack, I got to do these things. So work becomes, you become more efficient. And I would always say, if you're slow, go take a trip. You'll figure out that you'll get deals out of during your trip.
100%.
It just works that way.
Yeah.
It just, you're more efficient, you're busier, and then obviously when you're out there, you're out of your home, your room, your office, and then that whole sensory overload, you start kind of, the creativity starts kicking in. For me, I'm always like, I go to Florida a lot for Collective Genius or, just different masterminds, and being 33,000 feet up in the air, with a good podcast and paper and pen, I'd start saying things that is just, no one can get me on the phone because I don't pay for the Wi-Fi.
Right. What?
I just don't. I just listen to audio and just kind of clear my mind, focus. Okay,
it's good.
What does this look like? Because once you get here, then you have people, you're pulled every way. Yeah, you're pulled every way. So it's a good way to align yourself, focus, just get some clarity, and then, really start putting plans in place that are sexy, that you really want to get up and attack, right? So
and there's a lot of people in Collective Genius that do a lot of fucking business.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, I'm part of Collective Genius, the boardroom, same thing. Guy out there building 350 units all for rent for himself. He's building a community.
Oh wow,
all to keep.
Okay, that's crazy.
I love that, dude.
That's rad.
Yeah. So when you start seeing these people, doing different things, and they're all that's the beauty of real estate. It's so niche-y. You could do, storage. You could do, infill multifamily for, 60 under with this specific low income, HUD-backed financing. There's just so many niches. And you can make so much money in every single one. So you just pick one, So the beauty of these mastermind groups, you start seeing is like, dude, there's money everywhere, like everywhere. And limitations is what you have in your head.
100%.
That's it.
Yeah.
Because you can go out there and grab it,
Yeah. My coach is Tiffany and Josh High.
Okay.
I think they were in Collective Genius. They were at Kent's last one that he just did. But they're big. They do I think 400 deals in Ohio.
Oh wow!
But they do virtual deals too.
Oh,
so
wow.
they're virtually flipping in some of these markets, and they've kind of figured out a platform to do it. But being a part of their group, it just opens your eyes to what $1 million a month in flips. In profit.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to see some of that stuff, especially with their volume. Right? They're doing, I think in December alone, they locked up 42 deals.
Yeah. Wow.
But their price point's different than ours. It's probably 4 million in volume, right? For us, it's like, okay, you did 5 deals or 10 deals, whatever.
But the machine, the team, the staff, the SOPs, you build a humongous machine, and you can pick that up and drop it in San Diego.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're constantly evolving the machine? So I always talk to Alfred when he was building his this agency, and him and I always talk about it, and he's like, I'm almost to 100% with my system. And I'm like, bro, I'll tell you right now, you're never at 100%.
All right.
There's always things that you figure out that are holes in your business that you never realized were holes. Correct, and especially for me, I started implementing things in November of this last year because it was really just kind of like a side gig, just for fun. When agents would bring me a deal, I'd buy it, and that was it. Right? There was no SOPs, there was no process or system. But now because of the volume, you have to implement these things.
Correct.
How many times do you think you've changed it?
It's a constant thing.
Yeah.
And I think the mentality of 100%, I don't, honestly, the beauty of real estate that it's always changing. It's good and bad. It's bad if you're not quick to change. But I remember for 5-6 years, REO was going to come back, and they ended up selling them in the back door to, some big, institutional people, and they all disappeared. The shadow inventory completely disappeared. Short sales, supposedly they were going to come back with COVID. We had a few, but nothing, that significant. I always get the foreclosures are coming. Dude, they're nowhere close to even that's not going to come back. I don't see it for another 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Any way possible. So you have to be constantly changing your business model and adjusting, and even if it's in your own little niche. Let's say you're you specialize in Coronado. The dynamics are always changing. Hey, there's money coming from China. There's money coming from Canada now. Now it's coming from Mexico. Because policies, governments change, policies change. There's always this capital change, flight. So you have to kind of always be liquid and be okay to pivot. And understand that. The important thing there is reading where it's at. And speed. You have to be quick to it,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's something that, and especially as you start scaling and growing, you get into different markets and stuff like that. It's a lot. There's just more growth, more systems in place, better quality. You have to hire more. It just bring different layers to the companies.
100%. Yeah, and tactics are different for us. Like doing a lot of direct to seller marketing. What may have worked last year. Let's say a lot of cold calls and texting, where now the new rules with texting, those texts are getting flagged. Your websites are getting flagged with certain wording on your website, right? So now, the last 2 years, PPC has been big too, but eventually that could evolve to where PPC isn't big, and then direct mail, it's always forever changing. But that's why I think it's always so important. I wish that I did the mentorship stuff so long ago.
So marketing, I think, is such a cool thing because, for example, print has always been a great one, and then it completely stopped, and then it picked up again this last year. Text was the spot to be at until they passed the laws, and then recently, in the last month, text has just started picking up again.
Nice.
I'm getting 4 or 5 texts from everybody every single day now. So I don't know if someone figured out a loop there or something.
There is a loop.
Yeah. So they're starting to kind of get back to that. And it's always and the hard thing about our space is that the marketing budgets are so expensive. You spend $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 easy, and some of these big guys here, they're spending $200,000-$300,000 a month, So, and a lot of it, you're kind of throwing on the wall, and if your systems aren't there, lead manager, closers, follow up, all that stuff, you're just burning that money. So that's a very slippery slope. It's an art and craft. It's something that you're constantly working on, KPIs, numbers, it's hey, you got to respond within the first 30 seconds. Cause if not,
ours is 2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Second number 35, your ratio drops down, so that whole dynamic, it's an art, and not everyone understands it,
Yeah. And I agree with you. And I was nervous when I started. So last year, maybe I had the last 6 months of the year, I started doing. I've always had a cold caller for the last 2 years, and leads were steady. 3 leads a day, whatever it was. My you don't even want to know my cost per deal on what it was last year. It was stupid, $59 per cost per deal.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
So
that's awesome.
One deal we made 7 figures. That's why.
Yeah, right, dude, I love that.
So I've always had cold callers, but then I slowly started incorporating direct mail. Last year, and so figuring out your cost per lead, and it's all the boring shit. In the business that makes those marketing channels either make sense or they don't make sense. Because if you don't track it, you are just throwing money at the wall.
Correct.
But I feel like our business has become almost so predictable with the data that's available and what people are doing in other markets that it becomes a science.
Yeah. You have a lot of different dynamics that go into play. I know in the Midwest, people tend to stay home and watch TV. Where in California they don't really.
Right.
So it's hard to get a landline answer. We've at a call center, in Egypt and one in Colombia, the bigger companies out there. And they both struggled in San Diego. And one of them gave me the account back, said, we can't perform in San Diego. We tried it 2 other times and we failed each time, and for whatever reason, I think it's people just don't answer the phones anymore.
Sure.
And they're usually out somewhere. They're not home,
Right.
So, so there are just so many different dynamics, and that's a whole different art. And again, just because it works for one company doesn't mean it's going to work for you.
True.
They may have a phenomenal lead manager, that intake person that just is phenomenal at closing or following, packaging up the pre-qual or something. So you have to figure out what works in your business, and how you want that to look.
Are you guys doing any direct to seller stuff?
So we paused when the rates adjusted.
Okay. Up or down?
When the rates went up.
Okay.
Yeah, we really, because our cycle really went from, like it tripled, So you always got to manage your closing cycle, your cash cycle. You got to always manage that in your business. And if you're figuring you're spending $50,000 a month, on direct to seller, and they're closing, you're not seeing anything for a year and a half, and the market's coming down 10%, 15%, you're not going to spend. You will bleed the company dry,
Spending.
Yeah, spending money.
Yeah.
So we had other pivots, where it was like we went aggressive, like, direct, belly to belly with attorneys, with agents, with brokers, probate people, where it's like it's more sweat equity, it's
Right.
people to people, it's out there knocking on the door, taking lunch to them on Friday,
100%.
donuts, pizzas, whatever,
Right.
in office meetings, getting in front of 50 agents, figuring out the niches, like, hey, this guy kills it in probate. Look at his numbers. That's a guy we need to get in, build a good relationship with. We kind of more focus on that than spending a ton on stuff that,
And that's smart, because then you have other people who are doing it for you.
Yes, and then it also brings down the overhead a bit. So we don't have that many people trying to track the numbers and make, rushing to, answer the calls and texts. It slightly changes it. It's a good space that we like functioning in. Our team, the team members, that they enjoy that. They have success. Building those relationships and nurturing them and performing too. Because we tried as hard as we can. Whenever we give our word out, we're gonna try and do as
Best as you can. Yeah.
to honor that.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're like, we're gonna take this down just to kind of almost break even. It's like, but it's a relationship.
100%.
Yeah, that agent got paid. The seller, we did what we said we were gonna do. We just put it through the machine, but we honor the relationship. So.
Right. Yeah. No. And I mean, that's how it's been for me. It's funny you said, like, cash conversion and things like that. Right now, I think I'm spending like 35 a month on a mixture of things. And sometimes the cash conversion cycle is a little longer for certain, certain things and others.
Yeah.
And
I think it's going to shrink right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like, sometimes you just, like, as me being somewhat new to the space, in my experience with not maybe evaluating the business properly in terms of cash conversion and not expecting that in a certain way, like, I think sometimes I could have maybe put myself not in a bad position, but just like, whoa, like maybe I didn't need to be spending as much as I thought I did with the processes that maybe weren't fully set up. Like, was
Correct.
I spending in the right way? So I think, a lot of people, when they jump into these things, like what we were talking about, I am just one of those people who, if you tell me what to do, I'm going to do it really fast and implement. And then if I, slip up or fail, it's, it is what it is, and I'll learn from it, and I'll not make that mistake again. But it's funny you said that, because that's the last few months. I mean, I say that, but like it was like $500,000 closing in January, February. So it's okay, right? Because my cash conversion is now hitting, but to spend 30 or 40 a month for the last 6 months, you're like, damn, that's kind of a lot of money.
Correct. So I always approach it like green light, red light, and you always want to lead with revenue. You have to lead with revenue. You don't want to spend and hope to close. You want to make the money, and then the money you made, start spending that.
Right.
So, rates started dipping. They kind of wobbled the last 2-3 days, but we're seeing high fives again. Some Govy loans, FHA, VA, that's a healthy market. That will ease the lock-in effect. If you got a 4, you would move for 5. Yeah. You won't move for 7 or 8. It's just a shock, right? But immediately we started seeing inventory move off the shelf. We started seeing showings just jump. our dispo, which, again, we review our numbers. So it's like sometimes our dispo goes up, it's going to take 45 or 60 days to sell a property because that's what the numbers are for that neighborhood, those are shrinking down, so everything's moving a lot faster. So, now obviously we have to pivot to that, now obviously, we're not padding that much time, holding time, all that stuff. So, and then the cycle's going to shrink a little bit, we're able to turn everything a lot faster.
Right.
Know, so.
Yeah. That's why, in a sense, I am kind of glad that I was spending the money when I was spending it, because it wasn't like we were talking about, like everyone was kind of scared and kind of pulling back on the spend. And we, I continued it on. So hopefully, we'll see what happens this year, but I'm excited.
I'm super optimistic.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah. And even if it probably won't be a crazy year.
No.
But it's not going to be a bad year. Like even if it's still chugging along, there's enough business out there for you to do life-changing business. You know, there's enough out there.
Yeah. There's enough piece of the pie. And I don't know. It's funny, like I say that I'd be happy doing what I did, doing the same volume that I did last year, but then you say that and you're like, maybe I'm holding myself back.
So the beauty of it is, more isn't always better. Like sometimes you want to go deeper, sometimes you want to go wider, right? So, if you could set up a machine that's making a very reasonable income that you're happy with, and it's on autopilot, or you really, honed it down. The beauty of it is like now you can start going into other stuff, and it's very relative, the financing, it's not completely new, right?
Sure.
So you can go from, let's say, fix and flip to infill to multifamily to, to ground up to out of state, to different states, with better regulation than California, there's just so many different plays.
Right.
And that's the beauty of it. Like you don't have to go from let's say 20 wholesales to 200 wholesales. You can, if that's what that's what really moves you. But once you get to a certain level, then you're like, dude, I really want a coastal property. Now it's kind of like what they call lifestyle investing. I'm gonna go buy a place in Vegas, in New York, in Miami, because I'm gonna go travel there.
Right.
Airbnb and spend the rest of it there. So it really starts changing the thing. So, everyone's roadmap is different. And you can't say one's better than the other because. I think the priority there is finding that, what makes you happy, right? And, we all know people making a ton more money that are just miserable.
No, 100%.
And then people who are making a lot less that just have a great quality of life,
And it's almost a certain point of once you get to a certain income level, like what's the difference between making the next level? It's like, how do you really quantify that? And like you said, unless there's the happiness factor of like, hey, having different places where you can go travel to.
Yeah. I think that could be a very slippery slope,
right?
Because so obviously I grew up very humbly, right? And once you get to a certain level where your essentials, your basics are taken care of, like the debt's no longer like you're not taking on credit card, certain level where you're like, all right, I'm okay financially, majority of your issues are kind of gone, right? It's when you're in the rat race that's hard, that's stressful. I need that paycheck to pay the bills, the water, utilities, right? That's hard. But once you get to a certain level, now, when you're born in a certain environment where it's like, well, my dad's yacht is 80, I got an 80-footer and your dad's a 120-footer, and, oh, I don't want to ride in your yacht. That toxic mentality, which you see a lot, that's where you got to be very careful because it's easy to get in that, because as a human, you always want to develop and grow and the whole personal development part, but you got to make sure it's focused properly, right? Because when you get into those circles, it's like, oh, I don't have the best Ferrari. I got to, mine's not a pista. It's a, it's a standard one. So you have to be very careful, and especially if you got kids, like making sure that they are well grounded and understand, that it's like what's truly important. It's like, when you keep it very simple, it goes down to gratitude.
Right.
And gratitude's very simple. Whatever you have at the moment you have, you're grateful for. So you're happy, whatever that is, So when the economy's bad, I'm grateful for a bad economy because it makes me a stronger business person. It makes me a stronger salesperson. If the investment went bad, I'm grateful for it because I learned how not to do that again, right? And when you have that mentality, now you have you're in a state of gratitude. You're in a happy state, regardless of what happens.
Right.
You're grateful,
Yeah.
happy. So that you can't it's not tied to money.
Right.
Obviously, money, I love making money, and I'm super ambitious, and I instill it to my kids, like, dude, if I'm going to take you here, you better take it to the next, further down, right? But it's not because I want to go out there and just blow it and,
right.
Vegas and gambling, dude. It's like, as you start scaling up, now you could do sexier things too. Like, what if you set up, a school system in South Africa or an orphanage system in Brazil or Ecuador or something, and put your name on it. You know what I mean? It's
right.
But that stuff, I think it's more moving, it's more rewarding. That's and that's because you got yourself there. You got yourself to the ability where you can say, hey, here's $20 million to do this in this country,
And that's legacy. At that point.
Yes. Yeah, totally. And then that's why when you think about it, it's like, when you have last names on libraries and, school buildings, it's like someone will do with a lot of money. It's like, dude, I won't be in the ditch pretty soon.
Right.
I can't get buried with my money,
Right.
So what's really important, after 2 kids, after 2 generations, they're going to forget you,
Right.
Unless if you go on the library and the school building.
Right. Did you ever fall into those traps of where like the nice things?
Totally. And this is so like being young, 16 through about 20, 21, 22. I think I had usually 4 to 5 cars. I think when I was 18, I think I had 7 cars,
Wow.
and it was like a Beamer, a Benz, Porsche, like every car you ever wanted.
Sure.
I had them in the driveway. And it's so dumb, because I'm like, I should have bought real estate. I should have invested in Microsoft,
Sure.
Apple,
Sure.
But again, hindsight, and most importantly, mentors. I didn't have the mentors. And for me, a success was tied to a depreciating asset, a vehicle.
Right.
It's like, dude, no, that's. I didn't have someone to tell me like, Memo, start door knocking these fixer-uppers, or
right.
or go out of state and buy some rentals, like something, right?
Right.
And it's as you scale, especially when you have very ambitious friends, it's always a constant thing. What's really needed.
Sure.
But it goes both ways. The way I look at it is, don't deny yourself of that piece of Ferrari, right? Like, go get it, dude. Or that trip, or whatever that is. Go after it, but do it properly, right? Figure out. If you saved up $100K, right, for that, let's say $300K for a pista, but let's say $500,000.
Yeah.
Gonna buy one, so let's say $500K. Go out there and park it in some cash flowing asset that's going to give you $5,000 a month to pay that payment on the car. You still have the asset, and it's being paid by the cash flow, but you're responsible by not blowing it on a pista.
Right.
And a pista is a bad example because that may go up in value. But let's say like a Honda or Toyota, right?
Yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah. That's going to depreciate in value. That's a short-term need, right? And in 6 months, you're tired of the car.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I had one of my first cars was a Cabriolet 911 Porsche, my dream car, red convertible. I loved it. It sat in my garage for like 8-9 years. I drove it for like 1 or 2 years, and then I was like, it's uncomfortable, it's convertible, this and that. And
Right.
it's like, dude, that tells you it's like within 6 months, you're over it,
Yeah.
However, the assets keep on producing. You got appreciation, you got the write-off. I mean, that's a win-win.
Yeah.
So
I love that. Last year I bought, because I feel like I'm in that phase of like, I kind of, want to buy a bigger house, started buying watches the last couple of years, looking at cars. And it was funny, this watch I bought last year, and obviously the most money I've ever spent on a watch. And I literally brought it home and put it in my nightstand and didn't wear it for like 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
It's like, okay, I just spent $47,000 on a watch, and I didn't even touch it. Like it was like almost an afterthought. Like I bought it, and it was just like, check, I'm done. Like there was no like. I didn't feel the excitement anymore, right? Because it was already like checked off the list. And I'm like, okay, is this how it's going to feel if I go buy, the car I want, and I go buy the car, put it in my garage, I'm going to drive it for a week or two, and then feel like, why did I do that? You know? And then there's bigger things, right? Like next, my wife, we just got married in November, right after we saw you. Next is going to be kids. Thank you. Next is going to be kids. Like we're talking about kids. It's like, okay, so like I'm doing all these things, but yet I should be going and preparing myself to what you said, buying more assets, keeping more things. And so it's funny.
Yeah. And I think there's ways of approaching it. For example, vehicles or watches. that's a big business. If you know how to buy,
Sure.
you could buy, and especially collectibles and stuff like that. A lot of those go up in value.
They
right?
do. Yeah.
And if you know how to buy these certain vehicles, you're able to drive them a year, 2 years, and still get rid of them and not take a hard loss.
Right.
It's when you go pay full retail, you drive it off the lot, and it goes 30% down.
Sure.
That's where you got to be careful. But, but it's that balancing act. So I've learned, that you got to have these goals that really move you, because that, $50,000 watch, in your head, you had to make maybe, let's say, $300,000, $400,000 of income to feel justified to pay that $50K. Yeah, correct. Yeah, you have these numbers like, okay, I hit this to pay for this.
Right.
And that's super important because the watch was only $50K, but you made $500,000 because of that watch, right? Yeah. So you made an extra $450 out of it, and that's something that's constant in life. And I've learned, like, especially now in my point right now, that if I'm accountable for someone else, I'll do more for them than for myself, because I'm like, I'm good. Like, I don't really need, whatever it is, right? But if I promise that person this, I won't sleep good. I'm like, I got to make phone calls, do what I got to do to make sure that person gets taken care of. Right. So then you start figuring out how to, pick up people so their success really rises your success. Right? Sure. So it's like you start bringing team, your employees, your team members, and your priority is really their success, that they're taking 100%. Care of, that they're, they develop and they take care of their future. And by default, like, your companies, yourself, you start rising
up. Yeah.
And that's for me, because I've tried the thing, and it just becomes a low priority, right?
Yeah, it does.
Just, I don't really, I'm fine. I'll drive my car, whatever.
Right. No, and I totally agree. It is a hard thing, because you look at things and you're, at least like in the beginning of like to come up. It's the only reason why I bought this is because I had over $500,000 month. Yeah. Awesome. 1 month. Dude, so awesome, I was like, I was like, you know what? I've always wanted it. Yeah. The authorized dealer called me, and I was like, you know what? I could do it. And for watches, you can park the money. I could probably sell it and maybe lose $2,000 more for a year, whatever.
No, I've seen that.
Yeah. But no, I agree. I think it's like different priorities as you evolve. And now too, like, my acquisitions girl, she's never made 6 figures. So like my goal this year is like to pump the system till she gets, her goal is 100,000. I'm like, I'm making this shit too, and that will rise the boat too at the same time, bringing her up, pouring into her, making sure, obviously the business will run smoothly, and we're always adjusting, but my goal is for that to happen with her.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And something to keep in mind, because you're just a newlywed. You just got married, and you're gonna have hopefully start making a family. Yeah, there's seasons in life, and you want to embrace them. You know what I mean? Like, there's times like when you do the personality profiles, the DISC profiles, all that type of testing. I've always tested slightly different at different times in my life. When the wife was at home, with the kids or pregnant, and I'm the only rainmaker. It was strong alpha, like, dude, screw everything. I got to go hunt. Like, I'm up first one out the door before the sun. I got to make it rain somehow. And then, there's times in life where you're like, dude, I'd rather walk my kid to school in the morning than be at the office. Like, I'll start answering calls at 8:00, not 6. So, and it's important that you embrace that, because, those windows, like being married, newlywed, just you two, that's awesome stage. Once the kids start popping, completely different, but it's a whole different stage, and best time of my lives was when my kids were 3 to 5 years old. They were just, the most cutest, they can't do anything wrong. You're the strongest guy in the world. You're a superhero to them, that's an awesome time of your life, right now my kids are, getting ready to go to college, and they're doing their own thing, so for me, it's kind of making sure that they're getting, the lunch, the right mindset, the right exposure, the right conversations, the right people. And it's kind of now going back to myself again, because, I no longer have the whole parent thing going, Right. So it's important that you stop it and understand and appreciate every one of that, because like newlyweds, that was a great time, Let's go have dinner, let's fly here, let's go to Vegas this weekend. Sure, let's go, Once the kids come, that's not an option, Yeah. Now it's kind of like, dude, first day of kindergarten or pre-K, it's like, he no longer fits in these little shoes, So that your hustle, your business, your income, all that is meant to magnify that, right? And that's your priority.
Yeah.
And because if you focus on income and business, it's a tool, but it's not your happiness, right? It's a tool to make your happiness better, right?
Yeah.
So I'm excited for you, dude.
Thanks, bro.
You got good years ahead of you.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate it.
Enjoy and milk it for as much as you can, dude.
Yeah.
You know, and it's okay passing on some stuff, like not doing everything when it comes to business
Yeah.
to enjoy those moments, you know?
Yeah. No, I agree. I like that. Yeah, man, I love it. Thanks for coming on, bro. I appreciate it. Yeah, this was a lot of fun chatting.
Yeah.
Getting to know you a little bit better. You're about to be in that season of life of back to now that the kids are gone, you're gonna be able to go travel and do whatever the fuck you want.
I want to actually work, like really.
Oh, good for you. Yeah.
Because like, so I've always juggled, you know, being a parent and you know, husband, parent, and business. You know, it's a hard juggle.
Oh yeah.
But now it's like, now I can really focus on my dreams and goals, and now I really want to scale things and grow things. You know, like now that everything gets really sexy. You know,
what does that look like?
Forward mortgage. I want to get that into several states. You know, same thing with the brokerage. You know, we're getting renovate Riverside and renovate Los Angeles up and going. This year, get into different markets. I want to get the renovate brand into Cali, Texas, Arizona, Florida.
Are you trying to franchise out?
No, it's all privately held.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I want to keep it that way.
Okay.
At the moment, at least, you know. But there's you know, it's just part of growth, you know, and a lot of it's organic, you know. Like, you know, we're always getting deals from SoCal, so it's a natural growth part is, you know, expanding. We already have crews up there. We already have everything up there. It's just branding it and you know, running with it now. So
it's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's are you gonna start taking outside investor money when you expand to these other markets?
So one of my hires, actually, he starts next week, is a fund manager.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's out of Miami. I actually have two, one in New York and one in Miami that are starting this month. And part of our growth, and that's more for the development side, you know, a lot of the infill, a lot of the you know, new construction and multifamily, because I do see opportunity coming up in multifamily. You know, a few months ago, I saw a stat that 90% of all commercial loans that resetted were in default, not because of payments, but because of the terms of the covenants of the loan. So they got to come to a capital contribution to bring down the loan to value or something. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity popping up. And I started seeing it the last few months, you know, not in scale yet, but I truly believe in the next 6 months to a year, there's going to be a lot more deals. So, and these deals are like, you know, $100 million, $200 million deals. So, you know, you need $30, $40 million to take them down. So that's a full-time job that I can't, like, I don't have, I'm already spread too thin.
Yeah.
So that's where these guys are coming in. One's pulling out of, hopefully, out of New York, that, you know, he's in the family office, hedge fund space. The other guy's more in the Latin America international investor space. Okay. And that's where we're working on to hopefully grow those verticals of the company, the multifamily and the development further.
That's huge. I think that's like I think for us, it's always the next evolution, because it's like, okay, cash flow is extremely important. Like,
yes.
What we do is more, I would say where I'm at least is more of the hustler versus CEO. But multifamily is definitely kind of like we just got a lead for a deal, 61 unit. It's in foreclosure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he just bought it 3 years ago. And so his note was he can't refinance.
Yeah, you can't.
He doesn't have capital. You know, and a lot of these people who are just taking like mom and pop money, you know, that I need to bring $2 or $3 million to the table, they can't do it.
Correct.
So that's where this guy is at. And
we're going to see a lot more of that.
So it's interesting. Yeah. But I don't know. I think, you know, going into this year and next year, probably going to be in a good position to be able to buy those with rates in 5 years and things like that. Or if, you know, a lot of those that you can build up and sell. So,
and what's really sexy, because like on the wholesale side, on the fix and flip side, it's very hamster wheelish, right? It's transactional. Boom, you just made $100K. Dude, but okay, let's do it all over again, you know?
And that's why I think big stuff is.
Yeah, so on that level, you know, it's more, you know, assets under management. Hey, I got $5 billion of assets under management. You know, I control $5 billion worth of multifamily office building. Yeah, that stuff is really, and that's a good 8 to 10 year buildup. You know, I'm trying to get my kid. My kid's 6, 7. He turned 17 next month.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to get him so he can kind of, you know,
manage that.
Yeah. Start flying out with brokers and getting
It's
that,
awesome,
you know,
dude.
get that going. So,
Yeah.
but it all starts with the capital.
Yeah, for sure. That model is sexy. Just get to know things as you go and evolve.
It's easier. I can tell you this. It's easier than what we're doing.
Interesting.
Like having to deal with, I got some crack house right now that I need to deal with an eviction, and you know, like no, I don't want to send anybody out there. You know what I mean? It's like we have a lot of issues when it comes to dealing with headaches with fix and flip properties. You know, contractors, you know, city ordinances, like all that stuff is headaches. Multifamily is just stressful numbers. That's all it is, because there's 3 more numbers at the end. Right? It's 100 million versus you know, a million.
Yeah.
So, but that's, I think you have to be in that space.
Yeah, I love that, dude. Yeah. Well, dude, thanks again for coming on.
I appreciate it.
Thank
you for having me on here.
I think this is a long episode, which is nice, but float. So I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on.